Who is David Milstein?
He is the senior advisor to Ambassador Huckabee.
Oh, did he work for Ted Cruz?
Yes.
Yes, he worked for Ted Cruz. Okay.
And he is the stepson of your best friend, Mark Levin.
He's Mark Levin's stepson?
Yeah. Yes.
He's working at the State Department?
Correct.
Interesting. So David Milstein is a political guy working now for Mike Huckabee in Jerusalem, and he was going through your lines.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, Mark Levin's stepson, David Milstein, was present for US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee's meeting with a literal traitor to the United States, and that's of course Jonathan Pollard. Interesting. So you have this guy who's literally just an aide to Mike Huckabee having an outsized role and influence over US foreign policy. And nothing makes that clearer than the fact that he's the one who got the gentleman that you saw on that screen talking to Tucker Carlson fired because he didn't go along with the Israel first policies that Milstein was pushing for in the State Department. So I'm gonna give you some more details on that in just a moment, but before I do, Cenk, your 2 cents?
If there is a real American government that represents the American people at some point, I think these guys might be in significant legal trouble. Some of these folks literally seem to be working for Israel and not America. And if they're inside the American government and they're making decisions in favor of a different country, that is a crime and a very significant one. So let's find.
Is it? Because after learning about Huckabee's meeting and the fact that the White House defended Huckabee having this clandestine meeting with a traitor, someone who was convicted of espionage, okay? He had a meeting with that guy, and the White House defended him.
Even though he did it behind the White House's back and behind the CIA's back. So the reason why that's the case is and that is a spectacular example of showing that Israel definitely controls our government.
100%.
Definitely.
How can anyone
if that
deny
happened with
it?
any other country, oh, I met with a traitor who actually gave our secrets to Venezuela or to Cuba or to Russia or to China, and I did it behind the president's back, that brother's arrested immediately.
Executed.
Okay, well,
No, I'm sorry, but I mean, you have Pete Hegseth right now going after Mark Kelly because of the video that those 5 Democrats put out urging the military to not listen to Trump. They shouldn't have done that. I don't think that was the right thing to do. I'm just keeping it real. Okay, but Hegseth is now thinking about going after Mark Kelly specifically for potential espionage. Homeboy, our ambassador to Israel just met with a literal traitor to the United States, a convicted traitor to the United States. How about focus on that for a minute?
And in secret and inside the US Embassy. That man should have never darkened our doorstep ever again after betraying us more than almost anybody has, other than another Israeli spy, Robert Maxwell, who stole our nuclear secrets. What kind of an ally is this? And yet there are tons of people, as Anna's about to tell you, that are inside the US government who clearly appear to be working for the Israeli government. And by the way, any talk of execution is of course through official channels.
After conviction.
Conviction,
an official
treason,
sentence.
etc.
Yes.
And even then I wouldn't be in favor of it. Anna would, okay?
I would.
But guys, we're nowhere near that. What we're at is one day we should get control of our own government and see if these guys broke the law, because it looks ridiculous right now.
So let's talk about the traitor known as David Milstein, who's an aide to Mike Huckabee, US Ambassador to Israel. So he actually made some waves a few months ago in September after Shahed Ghoreishi was fired at Milstein's behest. Tucker Carlson interviewed Ghoreishi about it, and we're gonna get to some of those clips because I think it provides some insight that's relevant to who actually controls our government here. It's not the American people. It turns out that it's a foreign country and individuals within our country who purport to be American citizens but seem to have far more loyalty to a foreign country as opposed to our own. And yeah, I am saying it, I'm saying it out loud. Now, Milstein, again, is a senior advisor to Huckabee. Prior to his current role, he worked with other Republicans, including Senator Ted Cruz, as you heard from that video earlier, and the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, his influence has little to do with making the lives of Americans better. Let's be absolutely clear about that. And that should be obvious from the fact that he was part of that meeting between Huckabee and Pollard. But in addition to that, Responsible Statecraft published a pretty fascinating and detailed piece that exposed Milstein just last September, revealing that in an effort to strengthen US support for Israel, Milstein has confronted colleagues he viewed as insufficiently pro-Israel, removed content critical of Israel from press statements, as well as a major annual human rights report, and tried to get the US government to refer to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria, something that's completely made up by religious zealots, a controversial term often used by supporters of Israeli annexation, meaning land theft of the region.
And real quick there, it is official American policy that we want a two-state solution, and the Palestinians should have the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So it is arguable exactly the contours of the West Bank, especially in Gaza Strip, but that is official. So what he is doing there, Milstein, is he's going against American policy
as a traitor,
and he's doing it with language of the most extreme religious right wing of Israel.
Correct.
And so he is instituting Israeli policy instead of American policy. And I believe that's a crime. He's saying, no, we're going to go against American policy and we're going to manipulate the American government into supporting Israeli policy instead. That is a massive, massive problem.
Yeah, it sure is, but you wouldn't know it based on how our government behaves. So with that in mind, the whole Judea and Samaria designation was something that Shahed Ghoreishi, who's now been fired from the State Department, pushed back on because he knows what the official US foreign policy happens to be. So when he saw that language, he did push back on it, and he was met with some serious consequences. He talks about it with Tucker Carlson in this next clip.
He would push a certain agenda that was very aligned with Israel that I found very problematic. Now, in this specific example, because we're discussing the third example of why I was fired, was that he changed the stability line to, we commend Speaker Johnson for visiting Judea and Samaria. And it's designed to erase any Palestinian legitimacy that this is supposed to be.
Right. So the point is,
Israeli land.
By using those terms, they're biblical terms, they refer to regions described in what Christians call the Old Testament. And the point is to remind everybody that this land was promised by God to the Jewish people, to the Hebrew people, and that anyone who's lived there subsequently for the last 3,000 years has no right to it.
Right.
That's the point. But from a sort of government perspective, Judea and Samaria are not real places in that they're not
recognized,
not nation states, they're not provinces, they're not.
And
do they have clearly defined borders?
Not from my understanding, I mean they do not, and that would increase. That would give you the opens the door. It opens the door to more land grabs,
And what would Israel be if it weren't for land theft? But nonetheless, Ghoreishi wouldn't exist, exactly. Ghoreishi removed the reference to Judea and Samaria and got reprimanded for it, even though Milstein is, again, just an advisor to Mike Huckabee. And eventually Ghoreishi got fired, which reinforced Milstein's power within the State Department as a literal aide to an ambassador to a foreign country. Okay, so Milstein, according to Responsible Statecraft, actually did get someone fired. A State Department official said, is he gonna find some way to throw me under the bus? So it has a chilling effect within the department, obviously. That's the whole point here.
That if you don't represent Israeli interests instead of American interests, you'll be fired by this rogue advisor to the ambassador. To be fair to Milstein, there was another assistant to the ambassador before this, in the first term of Trump, and he did the same role. He would block State Department releases. He would not and conclusions and reports.
Yep.
He wouldn't even share them with the ambassador, and he wouldn't share it with the White House. He was unilaterally deciding no, Israeli interest above American interest, to the point where I won't even let you guys see what our own State Department has concluded about Israel and Palestine.
Right, including human rights abuses, that kind of stuff, yep.
And if you're blocking our government from getting facts in order to help another government, Again, that is potentially a very serious crime.
Yeah. So let's get you some more information about what's been going on with this Milstein guy, again, Mark Levin's stepson in the State Department as an aide to an ambassador to a foreign country. So according to Ghoreishi, Milstein would even write memos in the voice of State Department Secretary Marco Rubio and even go around his higher ups in order to get what he wants. Take a look.
Like he would push in one occasion statements that were in the voice of Secretary Rubio, not even the spokesperson. And he drafted them, he would push them through and be like, I want this statement out. And
I want the statement out?
Yeah, like he would go through and be like, I drafted this is the statement I want. I would go through the process of clearing it, but he would fight for it. Like he'd be in the document, getting in arguments with people one by one in order to kind of overwhelm the process and get certain his agenda out there the way he wanted. And it's very difficult.
On what authority? I mean, that's pretty cheeky behavior for a guy who's an aide to Mike Huckabee, the former cable news host.
Call around the building and it was very consistent and persistent.
But he lives in Jerusalem.
He does.
In fact, one of the first things that Milstein did in his new role was launch his own review of the State Department's human rights report about Israel and the Palestinian territories. So the original version had criticisms of both Israel and Hamas's records on human rights, but Milstein made some edits, and those edits ensured that most of the focus that was critical of Israel was taken out. And the final version focused mainly on criticizing Palestinian groups and was only 9 pages long. The original version was 100 pages long. So think about how deep those edits were. And look.
And just real quick on that. The 100 pages were critical of Israel. He removed all of them. The 7 remaining pages were the context, 9 were the context of, yeah, Hamas also does bad things, etc., right? Which you should have in the report, right? So he made it seem like the only thing that was going wrong was how terrible and evil the Palestinians were as they were being slaughtered and starved to death, and omitted the 100 pages saying to the US government, it's actually the Israelis that are the problem. So he says, no, I don't want anybody else in the government or the American people to see that. I'm going to bury that on behalf of Israel. On behalf of Israel. Serious crime.
Yeah, but Mark Levin spends his days like obsessively posting about Nick Fuentes, who, has said things that are offensive and awful, but he is a 28-year-old streamer. So compare that to your stepson, okay, who is currently in a low-level position within the State Department, but is literally engaging in what I believe is espionage. He's going against US foreign policy, official US foreign policy on behalf of a foreign country. I think that's more problematic. I think he has more of a negative impact on our country than the streamer does. Just saying.
So, but Mark Levin is such a deep racist. He doesn't think Palestinian lives are worth anything.
He doesn't think American lives are worth anything.
He's literally said, both him, Randy Fine, have talked about slaughtering everybody in Gaza. And so to them, like, oh, you're betraying America on behalf of Israel to commit a larger genocide and murder more Palestinian children. Mark Levin's like, where's the question? Of course, that's why my stepson, I'm so proud of him, right? The way that he's captured the American government on behalf of Israel, there's nothing that makes Mark Levin happy.
He's a pig and he's disgusting. But so if you're wondering, well, why don't higher level officials within the State Department just tell this Milstein kid to shut the F up? Well, Ghoreishi gives us some insight into that as well. Take a look.
Now, I know that you say he's Mark Levin's stepson, but I mean, nobody takes Mark Levin seriously and no one watches his show, and like, he's just not a real person. He's like an angry old man on Twitter. Who cares whose stepson he is? Like, why doesn't anyone say, hey, tell that Milstein kid to shut the fuck up?
People would acknowledge the pushiness, but that's all I really got.
No one ever told him to stop?
It was difficult to say no to him on a lot of occasions.
Why?
So people did say no, but it took a lot of effort. So from my vantage point, I'm wondering, why would someone have so much influence? And why are people almost tiptoeing around it, right?
It sounds like they were.
right? And you would have to take a group effort of like, okay, this bureau and this bureau don't want to put this statement out, and then it would go away. But that was it.
We don't live in a sovereign country, and if you don't have a problem with that, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. So look, guys, it's not a complicated mystery. Israel controls our government, period, and they do it through agents like. And I don't know that he's technically an agent. That's for legal purposes later. And I hope that one day we find out and it's adjudicated through the courts. But through assets, agents, and just people who are Israel first, and they think, like Jonathan Pollard, they think, and Pollard just said this, I'm Israel first and always will be. America first is useless to me and is an anathema. He says America first is terrible. You should. And Jonathan Pollard asked Jewish Americans, by the way, he doesn't speak for Jewish Americans and he's a traitor, but that you should all betray America for Israel, and apparently some of them are. And I don't mean Jewish people, I mean these Israel first monsters. And it's not just Milstein. As I mentioned earlier, there was a guy named Aryeh Lightstone, who was the chief of staff for David Friedman, our former ambassador under Trump in his first term. And Lightstone was doing similar things, blocking State Department reports, not letting the ambassador see it, not letting other people in the government see it, removing all things critical of Israel. Who are you? Who do you work for? Why are you allowed to do these things? And again, any other country, if there's an agent, asset, or just someone who's loyal to another country, who's going around going, no, I'm not gonna let you see any of the reports coming out of the Ukraine war that are critical of Russia. I will only send reports critical of Ukraine, and I will block anything from getting to our ambassador, getting to our State Department, getting to the president that harms Russia's interests, or fill in the blank, any country, China's interests, Saudi interests, etc. That person would be investigated legally, criminally, right? But now there's so many of them inside our government, and everybody's threatened by them, bullied by them, to the point where they're like, well, okay, Israel, of course, should be served first before we get to America at all. If American interests should be all directed towards Israeli interests. There's a giant problem with that. And if you're in mainstream media and you're like, well, okay, all those facts are true, but no, I'm gonna cover it up on behalf of Israel. No, there's something wrong with you. We're not the problem, you're the problem. If you told American people these facts, they'd be enraged. That's why mainstream media is like, no. It's an Israeli protection racket. This is insane. These are established facts. There's no question about them. It's an established fact that Epstein worked with Israel. Mainstream media is covering it up to no end. Why? You're not in the news business, that's clear. All right, last thing is, Ambassador Liu worked for Biden, and he was our ambassador to Israel then. Well, this one he's doing it through official channels, so he's not breaking any laws, etc. But he would prevent his own staff from sending reports that were critical of Israel to the White House. So he's like, nope. So all of our ambassadors to Israel actually work for Israel. Their chief of staffs and their assistants and advisors work for Israel even more. And half the freaking government seems to be working for Israel. No, whenever we have an honest government, all these folks need to be cleaned out. And what I mean by cleaned out is an actual investigation, and one that's only factual and based on evidence. But if we find out that you work for Israel, yeah, severe legal criminal consequences. But we're nowhere near that, guys. Right now, they're totally in charge. They're in charge of mainstream media, they're in charge of our government, and anyone who objects is called an anti-Semite, a conspiracy theorist, etc. Even though we're the ones with the undeniable facts, and they have such garbage as, no, it's okay because they're a special ally.
No, they're not. They have been, this alliance has been to the detriment of the American people and our whole way of life, our freedom, our sovereignty. I think that's pretty clear at this point.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.